Welcome to 365 Brothers, the podcast. Thank you for listening. I'm your host, Robin Shine, and get ready for another episode where I introduce you to another amazing, interesting, intriguing, and inspiring African-American man from the United States. They come from a variety of professions, various parts of this nation, and all of them bring their wisdom. So, chill out, relax, and listen in. Make sure you follow us. We're on Instagram at 365 Brothers. Also, you can go to 365brothers.com/Linktree, LINKTREE, 365 Brothers /Linktree. You'll find links to all things 365 Brothers, as well as links to anything Robin Shine. Again, thank you, and let's listen in. Today, we have the privilege of speaking to a musician who's also a podcaster. As a musician, he is actually a jazz pianist. He is an educator and an arts administrator. He's currently a student advisor at the Berklee College of Music, and he's worked in various capacities as an arts administrator, both in the educational setting, the nonprofit sector, and he holds a BM in music business from the University of Massachusetts Lowell, and he also holds an MM from the New England Conservatory of Contemporary Improvisation. His podcast was launched because he wanted to give like hot takes on arts and also about the relationship between arts, culture, and the human experience from the perspective of artists. Let me be clear. Today, we have the privilege of speaking with Miguel Landestoy. We're going to find out about that music, find out about him. Before we go on to the questions, is there anything you want to share with the listeners to help them get to know you better?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me on, Robin.
Absolutely.
I'm a first generation Afro-Latino, and that kind of informs everything that I do. So my parents are from the Dominican Republic, and I'm the first person in my entire family to be born here in America. So I kind of have a different experience than the rest of my family. I do speak Spanish. I identify as Afro-Latino because it's all encompassing in my experience as a person of color here in America. So I'm really excited to get to know you a little bit, get into these questions, and thank you for having me.
So let's just go with that little easy start here. What is a favorite song or movie, either now or all time?
Yeah, I'm a musician. I'm a jazz musician, so I'll pick a jazz standard that I play a lot on the gig. Bye Bye Blackbird. It was between that or Kendrick Lamar, All Right. I'm eclectic with it.
Yeah, I love it. I love it.
For sure. But Bye Bye Blackbird is one of those jazz standards that I enjoy because when you actually look at the lyrics, it's extremely melancholy. It's actually really sad, but the melody doesn't sound that way. It kind of stays in the cut in what it almost hides itself to the listener on what it's supposed to mean. And I always like those dualities, things that sound one way, but actually convey another thing. So Bye Bye Blackbird is one of my favorite standards.
Okay. All right. That's cool. I'm looking forward to including a link to that, as I always do when there's a favorite song. What is a favorite quote, saying, metaphor, or book, and why?
I was a bad student. I wasn't a very good student. I was lazy. I didn't practice all that much. And one day, one of my teachers, Rose, she sat me down and she said, listen, practice shouldn't sound good. And I kind of looked at her like, what are you talking about? Practice. Whenever you sit down at the piano, it should sound good, right? She said, no. Mm-hmm. When you practice, when you're out here actually working on something, when you're hacking away at it in the woodshed, as we say, doesn't look good until it's a finished product. It shouldn't sound good. So I take that with me everywhere I go because I'm always in the woodshed. I'm always working on something.
I know that sometimes, especially now, a lot of kids are anxious. They're concerned about getting it wrong. Like they're very hesitant to, and so I'm wondering, did her making that statement to you about it should look ugly, it should sound bad, did that give you a freedom? What did it do for you to hear that?
I was stuck. I was stuck in only playing things that I knew I could play very, very well. And it allowed me to live in that place of imperfection. It allowed me exactly what you said, really, like to be okay with making mistakes and understanding that mistakes were the only way that I was actually going to be able to progress and get better as a pianist and as a musician. And it turns out mistakes are how you learn everything.
Oh my gosh, that's brilliance. That's just brilliance right there. Mistakes are how you learn everything.
Big facts.
So I want to take a moment and ask you about becoming a pianist, focusing on jazz. You can give us kind of like the highlights, how you got there.
Sure. Well, strangely enough, I grew up learning and playing classical music. Beethoven and Mozart and Haydn and all these white composers that everyone at conservatories like to highlight as the height of music.
Yes.
That was what I was doing all up through my undergrad in music. Even when I was at UMass Lowell studying music, I was primarily studying classical music. But when I did get into school, I started to kind of look at jazz as a way of self-expression. Instead of interpreting someone else's work, I was interpreting myself. I was expressing myself how I heard it. And that was a really enticing thing to me. So I was studying classical music in school, but then I would be in jazz ensembles. I started going to jazz jams. I started kind of engrossing myself into the community and realizing that that's really where I needed to be. Not enough to.
And how old were you when you did start doing that?
17, okay. 18.
Okay.
Like just figuring myself out, cusp of being an adult for sure.
Yes. And how did you then move into what you do now, which is really to share the power of music, is what I would say, the power of music for self-discovery and for enrichment, because you could be just full on just the music, but you clearly have an intention to have that music make a difference in other people's lives. Can you just say a little bit more about how you ended up in that area?
Sure. So it starts with bad news. I got injured.
Oh.
I hurt myself in my undergrad. I was practicing too much with bad technique. I was very tense. I didn't really know what I was doing. And because of that, I actually had to drop. I was there for performance. I was there to excel at playing, but I just couldn't keep up with the practice. So what I ended up doing was switching to a degree in music business. And that kind of gave me an understanding of just the industry overall, but also how screwed up the industry was and how I didn't really want to be a part of something that was just kind of for profit and not about the art.
Okay.
So I'm in music business. I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do with it once I get out. I don't think I'm going to be having like a playing career. That changes later, obviously. But and I'm talking to an advisor, and he says, "Well, you could go into nonprofit work. There's no money in it, but you could go into nonprofit work." And I start kind of researching, and I'm like, "Okay, this could be it. This could be a situation," because I always try to pay it forward. I know I had a lot of people really stick their necks out for me to be able to get to where I was at, going to college and all that kind of stuff. Like, I know a lot of folks that are first generation or come from my background don't always get to do the things that I'm doing right now. So I saw going into nonprofit work as a way to give back to all these different communities that helped me out. So that's exactly what I did. I graduated school and I started working first for UMass Lowell in their community outreach programs. But then I worked for a long time actually at the Community Music Center of Boston, where they do a whole host of different like financial aid packages, scholarship for mostly Black and brown kids in Boston. So I worked my way up. I was a registrar. I would sub in for lessons every once in a while when a teacher wouldn't show up because I played. I ended up being the business office manager, kind of running the whole show. And then eventually my boss left and I was the only one who knew her stuff. So I was doing some COO stuff in the background while I was trying to figure myself out. So the more I delved into it, the more I enjoyed just interacting with the community and using the skills that only I have as both a musician and someone who understands basic industry standards.
Awesome. Wow. I love it. I mean, I'm sorry to hear about how the injury led to, but in life, right, things come up and it's what you do with it. And it seems to fit you very well. Now is when I get to ask you about accomplishments in particular. And I ask this question in two parts. First, an accomplishment that means the most to you personally, and then the accomplishment that tends to most impress others. So what is the accomplishment that means the most to you personally, Miguel?
Well, it kind of folds into what we were talking about a little bit, honestly. I learned how to take care of myself,
Mm.
and in a variety of different ways, not just physically, but also mentally. The person that gets themselves hurt by overpractice and by just putting themselves in bad situations is someone who doesn't understand their own limits and doesn't understand how to go about achieving something without hurting themselves. And that was me. I was a constant overworker. I put way too much pressure on myself. Bad mental health. Obviously, that led to bad physical health as well. And, that's something that not a lot of folks would see. They would see me, after I got out of grade school, I was a really great student. I was always a student leader. I was always working towards something. Everyone would always see the hustle. They'd always see me striving for something, right? But they didn't see that I was killing myself in trying to put that image out there. Not even necessarily to do the things that it would take to actually succeed, but just the image of success was something that I was going for. And that's not healthy.
It is not uncommon for us in our culture to be about the impression, and even more so when it's about, now that we got to show a picture of it on our social media, right? Right. And so it's like run, do, show. I hear you. And I love that is the accomplishment, because really, if you don't take care of the vessel, if you don't take care of being here, ain't nothing else to accomplish. There's no accent. So, yeah, I think that's a good one. I'm laughing. The more I think about it, the more I'm like, wait a second, that's kind of basic. I could not have made a better segue. As you just heard, we were talking about taking care of our health. What accomplishments are there without our health? If you were listening last season, I interviewed Dr. Gregory Hall, and this brother has done extensive research on the nutritional needs of African Americans. He created sequence vitamins. They are specifically designed to address the deficiencies that lead to some of the preventable diseases that affect us in the Black community more than others, things like diabetes and high blood pressure and heart disease. So I've got a link in the show notes. Please check out his vitamins. I've been taking them for 3 months. I bought them the day I interviewed him because I was so impressed, and I am loving how I feel. And because I love them so much, and because he is one of our 365 brothers, you get a discount. So check it out. There's a special discount, and just click the link you'll find in the show notes. What about the accomplishment that tends to impress others most? Which one is that?
It has to be getting a master's from NEC. That's why I went there, not because it's not great. It's an amazing school. It's one of the top 5 conservatories in the country, if not the world. At the same time, I resent it a little bit. I'll tell you why.
Tell me.
I started to get better. I started to heal and be able to actually play a lot more. And I decided that I was going to give this a performance degree an actual shot. You know what I mean? And it was part of my figuring out how to take care of myself, right? And I was auditioning for schools and blah, 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 blah. And this whole time I'm gigging, I'm teaching, I'm on people's records, I'm doing my thing, right? But people weren't really taking notice because there wasn't that stamp. There wasn't that authorizer that says, you're good. And I remember this specifically because I got into NEC and one of my coworkers was like, wow, man, you must be really good. And it's like, bro, I haven't even gotten there yet. I was good 5 minutes ago, I promise. But at the same time, that's kind of the bill of goods we've been given, right? You go to school for the stamp of approval that says you're worth something, you're good. It's kind of part of the game. I learned a lot at NEC, and I really do appreciate my time there. But sometimes it's just I'm not the institution the institution doesn't define my musicianship.
Right.
And that's not what it's all about. But at the same time, you got to play the game a little bit. So everyone looks at my resume and they say, you see NEC, and it opens a door. That's really great.
Yeah, it's perfect that you use that one. You know, I'm steeped in that training, that cultural lens that says, ooh. And so when I saw New England Conservatory, I too was like, oh, New England Conservatory. But I mean, and it's true. It is the game that we're taught to play. But you know what? I mean, you know what's that saying? Don't hate to play, I hate the game.
I'm just out here being Kobe. Like, I don't know what you want.
I love it. I love it. All right. Well, now it's when I'll ask you, what is a person, moment, conversation, or event that has either changed the trajectory of your life or had a significant impact on your life, Miguel?
I gotta say, it's my father. It's both my father's presence and his absence. My father is a beautiful person. He is a really great human being. One of the most positive people I've ever met, and I think ever will meet. He's seen hell and back, and he's still got a smile on his face, and I really don't know how he does it. There was a situation when I was a kid, maybe 12 or 13, you know, just starting to become like, eventually he's going to be a man, right? And there was a situation where he had to go back to the Dominican Republic, and he didn't come back for good. I saw him a couple of times until I was about 19 to 20. So it was just me and my mom. My brother, who's also someone who raised me, was off discovering himself doing his own thing and working and like labor organizing in like California and Chicago. So it was really just me and my mom. And that changed everything. Before my father left, me and my mother didn't have as close of a relationship. Now we're like pregnant all day, every day. I was effectively the man of the house. I started working as soon as I could at 14. I was paying bills. I was keeping things afloat. If there was snow, I was the one shoveling. I had the salt, you know. And my mom was working 2 jobs to try to keep everything afloat. So his absence created me. He created the hard work. He created the hustle attitude. It created the sense of responsibility, and maybe even the unhealthy sense that people when people are relying on me, I can't fail. You know what I mean?
So I totally get the part in his absence, like how that created your drive in a sense, your commitment. Could you expand a little bit on that in terms of his presence?
Yeah. I thought my dad was like a superhero when I was like a kid, because he was always he always had a smile. He's strong. He can do anything, all that kind of stuff. And that was kind of marred when he was gone. And I had to reconcile and then repair that when he was back in my life, and trying to have a relationship with a man at that point who he left a boy.
Yeah, and I mean, and when you say repair, like the absence of who he was and who he had been for you, and then gone and then come back, what was that like, or what was there to reconcile?
I mean, I was angry for sure, and in hindsight, I think as you grow older, you always see your parents as more as human beings as you start to hit those milestones of age. Looking back, I see what he was going through, and I understand why everything worked out how it did. That doesn't necessarily mean that it was okay. But I had to swallow my anger, my pride. That was honestly, in some ways, still childish. And he had to start seeing me as an independent man who didn't really necessarily need him every step of the way. And, you know, we butt heads on that. I would refuse help when I needed it. He would try to give help when I didn't. And eventually we found our way to a point, where now we're cool. Now, I love my pops, and the trust is there, which is the cool thing. Like I can fully trust him when he says he's going to do something, or when I might need a hand with something, he's there for it. But there was a period where that trust wasn't. So
Yeah. No, thank you for expanding on that because yeah, I was missing that pivotal time frame that he was gone. It's not the matter of the number of years, it's the particular years. It's
Yeah.
literally that time when you're transitioning and you know, and I'm actually really just sitting here appreciating even more so how dramatic the change is during that
Mm.
14 to 18 time, right? Right. And I mean, it's not like I don't know, you know, we all talk about puberty and la, la, la. We know it's a major transition, but I can imagine like leaving someone when they're 13, 14, right? And then
Right.
you come back, let's make it another year later when they're 19. And it ain't the same. It's just not the same relationship.
No, not at
That's
all.
what, and that's what I hear. It's like, no, this, we're not going back to square one. We on square four. And we both
100%.
got to catch up. Yeah.
Exactly, right. On both ends, then that's important, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. So now this podcast has been and will always ask a question about interactions with law enforcement because that was really the start of it.
Mhm.
It's morphed into really me just being excited to get to know the lives of brothers and who they are. But I will ask now, what interactions have you had with law enforcement? And, you know, you can share one or two. They can't, just one or two that stand out for you.
I remember the first time I got stopped,
Mm-hmm.
um, and that was a very scary experience. Scary because I was a kid. I was 18. I didn't get my license when I was 16 because I couldn't afford the what is it, driver's ed.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and my dad, he had come back for like a couple of like a month or two. And we were definitely like busting heads then because it was very visceral. But he had left his car, and I didn't go to a school right away. I didn't go to UMass right away because again was a bad student, and two, I was working basically full time, helping my mom out, and I was starting to go to community college to get my grades up.
Okay.
So part of that was becoming self-sufficient and being able to drive myself everywhere. I couldn't expect my mom or a friend of mine to drop me off at work or
Mhm.
school or whatever. So I went out and I got my license. And I remember my second time driving that car by myself. I got stopped on a really familiar road. And it wasn't just one car, it was like 6 or 7 cars.
6 or 7
And
police cars?
6 or 7 cars. And I didn't understand what I did. I wasn't speeding. You know, when you're 18, you're pretty, like, you're either reckless or you're careful.
Right. No,
Right. And
truly.
like I was, 3 minutes from my house. You know what I mean? Like I was careful. There was no reason to rush. I wasn't going anywhere. And it was this old station wagon. I love that car. It was this 1996 Volvo station wagon
Mhm.
with like 200,000 miles on it. More than that. But it had this long back with all of these windows, and not all I remember, but a big thing that I remember is these like 5 or 6 cops with flashlights are looking into the trunk, not without even checking
They
my
hadn't
license.
asked your permission yet?
They hadn't asked my permission yet, and I'm 18. I don't know what to do. Like I don't really know what to do, and I hear one of them yell, "Oh, it's just a kid," and I'm like, "What? Like what is happening here?" And an officer finally comes to my window and is like, "Hey, you ran that stop sign," and I was like, I didn't. I hadn't run anything. Again, I was 18. I was being careful. I mean, I just learned how to drive. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you ran that stop sign, and I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, officer. I didn't mean to do that." And he's like, "Where you headed?" I'm like, "Home. Where's your home? The address. Whose car is this? It's my dad's. Can I see your, can I see your registration? Can I see your license?" Giving me like the riot act. I'm just an 18-year-old kid just trying to get home.
Mm.
And I didn't understand. Like one cop car, like one car stopping me. All right. Like if I might have run that light or stop sign. Sure. But six, I never found out exactly what happened, but around that same time, there was just a lot of drugs in my area of town. And I think they just assumed that I was onto something. I don't know. After they realized, you know what's funny? I speak well. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yes,
I speak. I
you're
don't think
bilingual.
exactly right. So as soon as they saw that I was like a native English speaking person,
Oh,
things shifted.
really?
Like there was like, oh, it's a kid. It brings it down. I'm speaking very eloquently. I'm being very, very respectful. What
Yes.
have you? The temperature went down. A bunch of a bunch of the cars left. It was just one guy who gave me a warning because I just got my license like 2 weeks ago. But I'm thankful for that. Whoever that the cat was who was just like, hey, it's just a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he brought the temperature down a notch, and then me handling myself well brought the temperature down another notch. But it was such a weird experience, a scary experience, because I just didn't know what was going to happen.
Yeah, that's why I asked the question. It's, I'm delighted to say that not every single man who identifies African American in any way has had such an experience, which is great. But so many have. And for that to be, you're 2 weeks in, it's like, welcome, here's your driver's license, and here is your driving while Black experience.
Immediate. Look at the customer service. Damn, America.
I do, I'm delighted that I'm able to talk with a variety of Black men and that you identify as Afro-Latino. And you mentioned about being articulate, and we are all used to hearing about, the more articulate you are, then, the way things can de-escalate more quickly. But you also hint at speaking English versus they're possibly assuming that you were not a citizen or not well integrated, whatever.
Whatever, yeah.
Do you have that experience where you also are being judged or you're subject to, I'll say, a heightened scrutiny because you occur as Latin?
It really depends on the person, how they perceive me. It's really interesting, actually. Like,
Okay.
white people who don't have a lot of experience with just people of color overall,
Uh-huh.
they read me as Black almost 95% of the time.
Okay.
Until they hear my name is Miguel. And they're
Uh-huh.
like, oh, okay.
Uh-huh.
And then people of color, because I wear my hair this way, they assume that I'm mixed, which I am. Like
Mm-hmm.
my mother is a lighter skinned Dominican woman, and my father is a darker skinned Dominican man. And
Mm-hmm.
funny enough, he doesn't think he's Black, even though he's like Bill Cosby color.
And is that because he identifies as Latino?
Oh, for sure, right? And
Yeah.
race is a different thing anywhere you go, right? In
Yeah.
Dominican Republic, Haitian folks are Black.
Oh,
Dominican folks. You see what I mean? Like there's these different hierarchies in every single
hold on,
culture.
hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on. For those who don't just keep a map of the globe, a picture of it in your mind, Haiti and the Dominican Republic are on the same island. One of the few cases where you've got two countries sharing an island in the Caribbean. And so I do know that there's Haitians that'll come over into Dominican. If like I'm dark skinned, if
Mm-hmm.
I were Haitian, then I would be considered Black in the Dominican. But if I were Dominican in the Dominican, what would I consider myself?
Well, it's like different. It's different shades. You know what I mean? Like there are tons of Dominican folks who have your exact skin color and shape. It's when you start to get people who are of deeper, darker skin, where it's like
Oh, because Haitians are darker, not having had the Spanish integration and all
exactly.
that. I got you. Sorry, I had to go down there because I'm like, okay, wait, what?
No, it's all good. It's all good. Right, right, right. Other Latino people will see me and they're kind of confused because
Mm-hmm.
like your hair is a little. it's a little nappy, but it's also not. And you wear
Yeah.
your beard, and you wear your beard in a way that is not what most
African American.
right. So like,
Uh-huh.
they're just kind of confused, and then they ask me if I speak
Uh-huh.
Spanish, and then we're good.
Yeah.
um,
Uh-huh.
so because of experiences like the one with police that I just described for you, and other little bits of colorism and racism that I've experienced throughout my life, claiming part of the Black experience just seemed right to me.
Mm-hmm.
While understanding that I'm also a fairly light-skinned person, and there are also different prejudices against Latino folks that I experience that Black people don't, and there
Mm-hmm.
are also on the flip side certain lighter-skinned privileges that I also experience. So like it felt all-encompassing for me. It felt
Yeah.
like a way to truly represent my overall experience.
Yeah. No, I get it. And it's funny. I have conversations with a friend of mine when we talk about DNA and stuff, and he'll call me mixed race. And I'm like, ain't that mixed race about this? Ain't no mixed race about this. I'm like, no, dude, I'm 80 Black, y'all. That's just Black. But then but it had me start thinking about how we identify and how people see us versus the freedom to embrace all of us. And anyway, which you are clearly doing.
I'm trying. That's all we can
Yeah,
do.
yeah. So now my favorite question: if the
Oh.
United States was a woman, what would you say to her? Whether she's a mother lover, neighbor, stranger, friend, you get to choose.
I think I could ask her, um, why do people have to be lucky to have a good relationship with you?
Oh.
So, like I've said, I've gotten a lot of good breaks in my life. I've had some bad ones, but I've had a lot of good. Things have worked out, and for a lot of people who come from where I come from, that's not the case.
Mm.
And if one of those things didn't break my way, one of those like breaks didn't happen, I probably wouldn't be here talking to you. I probably wouldn't have gone to NEC. I probably would have given up on the piano. There are all these little things that would have probably happened if there wasn't a mentor or someone to help me, or something just didn't luck out.
Yeah.
So why do all the other people who look like me or who have the same experience, why do they have the unlucky break of not being able to have a good relationship with America?
Mm.
And in turn, how can we make this not a game of luck to win the lottery and have a good relationship with you? How can we make this a situation in which we have a healthy, harmonious relationship that's actually beneficial for both of us? So, yeah, that's probably what I'd ask. Because I don't know if I want to date America. I don't know. It's kind of sus. Maybe an acquaintance, maybe a friend if we have an understanding. But
Right.
yeah.
No, I get it. I get it. She kind of fickle sometimes. You don't like me? You do.
You got to choose. You can't have both. Can't have
Right.
both.
Stop being wishy-washy. So, and I still have to read this question because it's so new, people. Beyond the generalities and stereotypes, what is one thing you wish all females understood? That's mothers, sisters, aunts, cousins, lovers, and spouses understood about the Black male experience.
We aren't all the same. Let me say it this way. We might all carry some sort of trauma in different ways, and we might all have similar things, like, for example, the not inability, but the suppression of emotion, or the experience of being profiled, and not just by police, but in a bunch of different ways, discriminated against, for sure. But we all have different experiences and different levels of experience in all of those things. And wherever we're at, meet us there. Like, just if I'm here, just meet me over here. If I'm a mile down the road, meet me over there. But you just gotta meet us where we're at.
I like that. of many things that you could have mentioned, you specifically brought up like the different kinds of, I'm just going to hashtag it, negative experiences.
Sure.
But traumas, like, you know what I'm saying? Like those kinds of experiences of being judged as Black man.
Right.
Yeah, actually, no, I guess I was just getting that complete for myself. Yeah. Yeah, I get it. I get it. Right after the George Floyd incident,
Mm.
I have a very good friend who is European American and literal, well, anyway. And she, she wants to be woke. And I love her for that.
Mm-hmm.
And, but I remember having conversations with her, and she would presume that I had the same experiences that she was newly discovering,
Uh-huh.
you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, yo, well, to be honest, I mean, there are definitely some experiences that I've had as a
Right.
Black woman,
Of
for
course.
sure. But I gotta tell you, I never been stopped like that. And so it was like, and so when you're telling me what you wish all Black women, not, and I didn't say Black, actually, I said all women.
Right.
What all women knew about the Black male experience, I can only be, I shared my experience just to say, if it wasn't for that, I probably would be like, oh yes, that makes sense. And just go right on. Like, yeah, everyone's different. But I remember feeling like, no, you don't know my experience.
Right.
And if you don't know my experience, how can you really know me?
Mm-hmm.
And so what I hear you saying is like, if you're going, and I'm adding on to this, that how can you truly love me if you don't know me?
Right. It's too surface level. It's like you see me and all you see is like a bunch of stereotypes. Like I'm a nerd for sure, but if I take off my glasses and and I played a sport, I played sports all through high school.
Uh-huh.
The stereotype is I'm supposed to be a really great athlete, right?
Yes.
But you wouldn't know that I'm into anime and BS. Like like everyone's a different. Like if you only attribute us to these certain prototypes, you're missing the whole boat, and you're doing a disservice to yourself, but also to us by a mile.
There's a phrase a friend of mine always says about, how are you going to cheat yourself from love? And that, and when we don't take that time to get to know that person, we truly are cheating ourselves.
Thanks.
Awesome. Well, last season I asked about love. This season I'm asking about power. So now I'd like to hear either the first moment that you can recall or the first moment that comes to mind where you experienced yourself as powerful. You knew that you had the power.
The first thing that comes to mind is recently I played a show. I played a show with some dear friends of mine, and what we did was we learned an entire record. We learned an entire like record's worth of pieces and presented it as like this is that record,
Okay.
but played by us and our own interpretations of it.
Okay.
And when you are someone who improvises, when you're someone who is in the moment all the time, you're not always going to reach the audience. They're not always going to understand what you're trying to say. You're not always going to be articulate in what you're trying to say, musically or otherwise. And for the last 4 or 5 years, I've thought like, I don't know how to control what I'm saying on my instrument. People aren't hearing it. Like, I think like, I just played a ripping solo. I just did it. And like the reaction from the room was cold. Like they didn't connect with what I was doing. But at this performance, and this was the first live performance I did after I was done with all of school, and I had actually had a time to like sit and digest a little bit of what I just been through. And I felt it. I had the audience in the palm of my hand. I you have to learn how to tell a story. You have to learn how to give the journey to the audience so that when you're done, you did that. you sat there and you delivered something to them that enriched their lives and gave them a moment of solace from whatever they're doing. And I made a bunch of mistakes that night, but I reached that audience and I felt that I had finally gotten the ability to flip that switch and just like understand what I needed to do in the moment to be musically powerful. Which for any musicians listening, you know that's like that's a moment, that's a pivot. Like you're not really the same after that because you felt it. Yeah, you can't really go back to being to guessing because now you know the recipe, you know how to do it, you know how to get into the mode, you know how to make yourself what you need to be in that moment. That's that's what comes to mind most recently. And I know a lot of the stuff in music also. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm a musician, but I'm trying to say it in metaphors that make sense to me and hopefully for you.
Oh, no. Let me tell you. I think anyone who performs gets that. What I'm really stunned by is that you seem to be aware that you tapped into something that you can call up at will.
We all have our bad days. I'm not going to say it.
No. I'm not saying it's perfection that, you know, like it's like a genie, but I'm saying what's the secret for you? How did you do that? How did you get the audience? How did you make that connection?
Well, honestly, it's simple. It sounds simple. It's a choice. Like sometimes when you're on stage, you're nervous. There are a bunch of different factors, right? There are a bunch of different things going on that you have to deal with in the moment to do what you're doing. But I find that there comes a point in the process of making music that a binary choice comes. Like, are you going to tap in, or are you just going to sit back and rely on your training? And your training will always work. If you practice, it'll always work, and the audience, they might not be the wiser. Like, oh, that was amazing. Like, oh my God. But when you make the active choice to be completely present and dig in, and if you play yourself into a corner, betting on yourself that you're going to play yourself out, even when you make messy mistakes, which I do, the audience is so much more appreciative of what's going on because they see it, they feel it, the air shifts, everything changes.
I love it. I can't help it. I don't care. I'm gonna talk about teaching.
Oh, please do. Please do.
I deliver the same lessons on economics twice a year. And when I choose to show up like, all right, y'all, we about to do this.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And that choice, it doesn't matter what they don't get, what they do understand, because we're going on a ride together.
Right. Exactly.
And the contrast is, I'm going to teach you something today, and I'd like you to pay attention here. Oh, it's even painful for me now. And I also know what you mean about once you get there, there's no going back. Because now, if I'm in front of students and I'm doing, all right, today it's like, Robin, just be honest with yourself. You're having a nasty day and you have zero intention of connecting with the kids. So why don't you just sit your little butt down and just give them the assignment and work yourself out. And I do. I'll switch the assignment because I'm not present. I'm not here. It ain't no fun for you. It ain't gonna be no fun for me. I don't want to see your little eyes looking at me like you're still talking.
Oh my gosh. That's so real. And you know what's funny? We had to reschedule this because I had COVID, right?
Yeah.
I was just coming off of COVID and I had to play a gig.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd been pretty sick. I hadn't really like touched my instrument for a little while, and I had to unload, I had to set up, I had to perform,
Oh, the
I had
whole
to do the thing.
thing.
And what did I find myself doing? I found myself just laying back on my training
Mm-hmm.
for a little while. And then, see, every single circumstance is different. I was playing with one of my former professors, so he's a beast.
Mm-hmm.
And this dude threw down.
Oof.
He laid it out. He was like, no. This is what we're doing. And I was like, and I had to solo right after, and I was like, word, okay, you going in, I'm going in. And then suddenly everything shifted. Everything was different. The rest of the gig was night and day comparatively to the first couple of tunes. Like sometimes you just need permission.
Right, just show up. And to belabor it, I have to say sometimes I love what you just said, because sometimes it's my students who will give me that permission, because I'm sitting there and I'm like, no, I'm just going to deliver it today. I'm delivering and la la la. And then the kids looking at me like, you about to sit here and deliver?
I know what you can do.
And if that's what you're going to do, and I mean, they don't say any words, but their face is like, right? And it's like, okay, look, like one student, I won't even say her name. Let's just make her name Lisa. All right, Lisa, fine, I'll show up. So I hear you. I hear you. That's beautiful. Well, last question is about an opportunity you have to spend 5 hours with any Black man, living or passed on. If you could spend 5 hours with any other Black man, who would it be, and what would you do, or what would you talk about?
I think it'd have to be Kendrick Lamar.
Oh.
This most recent record of his, I think it's both some of his best work and the work that is not made for our consumption. It was made for him to release, if that makes sense.
And tell us which one.
Mr. Morale. Okay. I'd want to talk to him about, because there's some controversial things about the record. He uses a couple of slurs against the LGBTQ folks in a certain way that the LGBTQ community wasn't appreciative of. At the same time, there were some folks in the LGBTQ community who were like trying to understand and see where he was coming from, because he wasn't necessarily using the slur in a derogatory way towards them, but more in trying to unpack his own homophobia, which was interesting. And I'm going to make a contrast. This is a switch. Will Smith, come with me now.
Yes, you got my attention. Come on.
Will Smith shouldn't have gone up on the stage and slapped Chris Rock. That's not the answer. I don't think so.
Yeah, understood.
Right, like understood. But this man just spent the last 30 years being one of the most beloved actors and human beings on the planet, and he makes one mistake. It's a big mistake, and it was in front of the entire world, and literally the entire world flipped on. And my question is, like, Kendrick, you did something that hurt, or that these people say hurt them.
Yes.
Right? Like, if you make a mistake, perceived or true, do you think society will like turn on you? Like, do you think if you were to make a mistake on the level of a Will Smith, do you think that everything would turn and the Pulitzer Prize would go away and everyone would disregard you? Because I don't know if that's true, because I don't know that Kendrick cares what people think. And I'd just be fascinated to talk to him about that, and also about just his process overall, because I've never seen anything like it. I've never heard anything like it. And it kind of blows me away. I grew up playing classical music. I'm a jazz musician. I improvise, but like hip hop, the 90s, Big L, Nas, that was what my brother was playing for me all the time. Shout out to my bro. And part of me coming into my musical identity is trying to figure out how to bring all of me into all of the music that I make. And that's what Kendrick does. So those would be my two questions. I don't know if that first one makes total sense.
I think so. I think what you're saying is, what I heard was your curiosity of him about the possibility of being denounced.
Yes.
And, and people walk away. And I tell you where I wasn't clear is if you were asking whether or not, because it seems like he don't care.
That's what I think, but I don't know.
And that's the question. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that was more clear for me. Okay. You kind of got me thinking, because I will admit I was one of those people like, now that was just ridiculous. Look what you done started. But you're right. 30 years. Yeah.
Not co-signing what he did. Like
no.
What he did was wrong. Flat out. Like he shouldn't have done that. But I mean,
what's an appropriate punishment? What's an appropriate cultural response?
Right. And I don't know what the answer to that is. I mean, there have been arguably more grotesque views and things expressed on like an Oscars or a Golden Globe stage, usually by a white guy that no one cares about.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't get reprimanded, and they're still seen as like the great actors that or artists that they were, instead of seeing them for like the negative things that they did. And I'm just saying, like 30 years of goodwill and one slap, and what is the appropriate punishment?
You know what? See, now you reminded me, when Halle Berry won her Oscar, there was this guy, and I can't remember his name, an actor, younger. And when she came up, he gave her this unwelcomed kiss. Like you could see, he forced his kiss on her.
Yeah, right? I remember this. I don't remember the actor's name, but I remember this.
Yeah. And there was not even close to the upset over Will slapping Chris Rock. And I mean, he literally forced himself on this. That is a form of sexual assault, but nobody called it a sexual assault.
100%.
Thank you for that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Cool. Anything else you want to say about that?
No, it's just interesting, because I don't think as a society we figured out what the appropriate, how we can heal in a way that brings all of us up together, instead of casting some folks completely aside, and castigating folks for mistakes. Everyone has agency. Everyone should be responsible for their actions. But how do we move forward in a way that everyone can agree upon? I don't know the answer to that, but I think right now we're in a moment where we're trying to grapple with that.
And you just created a possibility that I hadn't seen, which is just in your posing that. What if as a culture, it was understood, it was just automatic that we knew once that happened, I wonder which show Chris Rock and Will Smith are going to appear on when they have a conversation about this. Like as if it is our norm that the person harmed and the person doing the harm will have a restorative conversation. That is just what we do. Like that would be a completely different culture.
100%. Like everyone holding each other accountable. I believe you're working through a restorative justice model.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Like if that was the default, completely different society. Like it wouldn't be like Zion or nothing, but it would be.
Let's be honest. If we were that kind of society, we would have already had a national reconciliation conversation about slavery.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, I have had a fabulous time. The only thing we didn't get a chance to do was talk about your other joy, which is your podcast. So before I ask you what you got out of this conversation, I want you to just tell our listeners a little bit about your podcast and where they can find you.
Thank you so much. So Play Black, it can be found on anywhere you listen to podcasts. And it's me and my partner, Jay Cottle, who is a local nonprofit executive director. His nonprofit is called Dunamis. It helps artists, mostly artists of color, navigate the music industry and how to exhibit their artistry in a way that works for them. But we're both nerds, and we both like to take in a lot of different media, and in some ways helps us navigate the world as people of color. So we decided to start a podcast in which we give you hot takes, talk about what's going on in the world on the daily, and all from the perspective of two artists of color, me being Afro-Latino and Jay being a Black man. Alongside that, I also host a limited series called the BIPOC Artist Hour, in which I talk to artists of color about the unique experience of being a person of color in the arts, but also what brings them joy outside of their art. Because we talk a lot about the struggle, but we often don't talk about what just brings people of color joy. So
lovely.
Yeah.
Lovely. Well, I will, as always, have links so that you guys can check it out. This is really a podcast where you get to find other places to go and hear unique voices, such as Miguel's. And so the last question, Miguel, is what did you get for yourself, or what did you learn about yourself from having this conversation?
I miss talking to people. We've all been so insular since the pandemic, and we haven't kind of regrown those nerve endings to be able to just go out there and be present and just have a conversation with your phone off for an hour and a half. Yeah, it's just lovely to get to know a new person, to just be able to sit and have a shared conversation. And like, we didn't disagree on anything, but I would have welcomed it, because it would have been taken in good faith. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm going to do a lot more of it. And hopefully I'm going to do a lot more of these kinds of interviews on my own pod, because I've gotten the taste of it, just like soloing, just like tap into the source. I've gotten the taste of it now. I can't get the taste out of my mouth until I do more.
I love it. And, listeners, this is really one of the things that I hope people take away from hearing these conversations, is that you go out and have more conversations yourself with the people in your life, the people but wait, ask them something you ain't asked them before.
Yes.
And people that you meet. So I just encourage everyone to go out and ask somebody, pick one of these questions we talked about here. It don't matter. Make up your own. I don't care. All right. All right. I always finish every conversation with my impression of each brother, because each person on this planet is a unique, in my opinion, expression of God's love, God's style, God's character. And you, my dear, are love rising. It's what you do with music, what it meant for you to connect with your audience, like the fact that that's the one that you shared as power. And then the reconciling you did with your father throughout all of the conversations. What I really hear is just love rising. So thank you for being an expression of love rising for all of us.
Thank you so much for that. And thank you for setting us up and being such a wonderful interviewer.
Thank you.
Remember, you can follow us on Instagram at 365 Brothers. Also, follow us on Facebook at 365 Brothers, the podcast. Lastly, I just want to let you know, producing a podcast, it takes something, and I'm really grateful to have partnered with alitu.com. They make publishing easy. There's a link in the show notes for anyone who either has a podcast or is thinking about a podcast. You don't need to learn all that sound balancing and compression. Save all that. Use your time for what matters, interviewing and sharing the stories that your podcast brings. Thank you for listening to 365 Brothers. I certainly hope you enjoyed the episode. I encourage you to subscribe. Please leave a review. I want to know what you think. Also, if you know someone who would be a fantastic guest for 365 Brothers, please direct them to our website, 365brothers.com. You'll also find all the episodes there, 365brothers.com, and your support is welcome. And remember, to listen is to love.